Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that is way more than just a nostalgic piece of arcade hardware. We're talking about a true cultural savior. We're going to explore the 1990 Data East pinball machine based on the hit animated series The Simpsons. You know, this isn't just a story about a fun game with flashing lights. It's actually the fascinating history of how a perfectly timed pop culture phenomenon, combined with some seriously brilliant design and storytelling, literally breathed life back into a dying visible medium.
Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll start by looking at the stark reality of the dead pinball market in Section 1. Then, we'll check out the creative process in designing Springfield. Section 3 will cover the innovative sights, sounds, and synthesizers. Next, we'll see exactly how it became a monster arcade hit. And finally, we'll examine its lasting legacy in the 1990s pinball revival. It's a pretty high-stakes historical narrative, so let's get right into it.
All right, Section 1, the dead pinball market.
Before we can really appreciate the triumph of this specific machine, we've got to set the stage. By the end of the 1980s, the pinball market was widely considered to be, well, completely dead. And the culprit? The surging video game market. Digital arcade cabinets were offering these incredibly complex, programmable, and rapidly evolving experiences the traditional mechanical pinball machines just couldn't seem to compete with anymore. Players were losing interest, operators were losing quarters, and physical pinball was rapidly losing its relevance. The industry needed a miracle, or at the very least, a really good theme.
Moving on to Section 2, designing Springfield. To find a solution, licensing giant Fox and manufacturer Data East teamed up at their Melrose Park, Illinois factory to create a highly thematic, story-driven game. And what's cool is this wasn't just a corporate cash grab, it actually had a lot of heart. The producers at Data East took direct advice from the Simpsons creator himself, Matt Groening, during the game's development. Looking back in 1993, Groening captured the joy of this collaboration perfectly, saying, "The Simpsons has allowed me to do all the good stuff I always wanted to do as a kid, like design a pinball machine." Having that direct, enthusiastic involvement from the creator added a really authentic human element to the production that players could immediately feel.
And on the actual playfield, the designers didn't just slap a logo on a generic board. No way. They meticulously modeled the machine after the animated sitcom itself. Those pop bumpers? They were cleverly styled as the iconic nuclear reactor cooling towers from Springfield. The targets players aimed for actually depicted the Simpson family's favorite things: chocolate ice cream, donuts, and even the family bowling. Literally every square inch of the board reinforced the theme.
In an era where digital design was really starting to take over, this physical machine brought Springfield to life through good old-fashioned traditional craftsmanship. The vibrant, chaotic world you see on the board was meticulously drawn by hand in pencil by artists Kevin O'Connor and Margaret Hudson. This traditional approach ensured the physical game perfectly captured the exact warmth and style of the animated television show.
Which brings us to Section 3, sights, sounds, and synthesizers.
So the artwork was obviously great, but the hardware under the hood was designed to immerse the player in a completely new way. To bring the show to life, Data East equipped the machine with a Yamaha synthesizer specifically to blare that iconic, quirky television theme song. On top of that, they utilized a computerized voice system powered by an Oki sound chip. Visually, the game fed information to the player through an alphanumeric display. And as a fun piece of trivia, this actually marked Data East Pinball's final use of the alphanumeric display before the entire industry shifted over to those dot matrix screens. All these specific components worked together to create an absolute auditory spectacle in the arcade.
But you know what really brought that sound chip to life? The voices. It wasn't just playing generic grunts and beeps. The characters were constantly talking to you as you played. And it wasn't cheap sound-alikes either. Data East secured the original voice actors from the series: Dan Castellaneta, Nancy Cartwright, Hank Azaria, and Harry Shearer. So, if you drained a ball, Mr. Burns might yell out, "Smithers, fire that man!" Or Bart might chime in with his absolute classic, "Don't have a cow, man!"
These voices connected directly to your gameplay. The original cast actually reacted dynamically to what you were doing on the board. If you missed a shot, Mr. Burns might condescendingly ask, "Don't you know how to use flippers?" Or Bart might commiserate with you, saying, "Hey man, we're both underachievers." Combine this interactive auditory feedback with a totally chaotic 3-ball multi-ball mode, and you had an arcade experience that felt alive, responsive, and incredibly engaging. Let's look at the results in Section 4, a monster arcade hit.
5,052. When the game released in October 1990, that was the massive production run for this machine. To put that into perspective for you,
In the context of the supposedly dead pinball market of the late 80s, producing and selling over 5,500 units was a massive financial success. It proved without a doubt that players were hungry for the right kind of physical game, and it did incredibly well in the US market.
The internal excitement at Data East was palpable. By November 1990, just a month after the release, Data East Executive Vice President Gary Stern triumphantly told the press, "This game is already on its way to becoming a monster hit. Fun, a whole package. Voices, music, artwork, great ramps." Stern's quote pretty much proves how all these individual elements we've been discussing, the authentic art, the custom voice chips, the engaging gameplay ramps, really did culminate in a smash hit.
Finally, Section 5, the 1990s Pinball Revival.
Looking at the wider cultural and economic legacy, it wasn't just fans of the cartoon dropping their quarters. Industry professionals took notice too. The Amusement and Music Operators Association, the actual group representing the coin machine operators themselves, named The Simpsons the best pinball game of 1990. Getting this level of critical acclaim from the actual operators validated its industry-wide impact. It was officially a lifesaver for arcade revenues.
The machine's cultural penetration was just immense. It totally transcended the typical arcade demographic and became a coveted collector's item, scooped up by famous owners, like the show's creators themselves, Matt Groening and Sam Simon, and even legendary basketball player Wilt Chamberlain. Owning a pinball machine literally became a status symbol, entirely driven by the strength of this specific cultural crossover.
The timeline of this revival is amazing. We go from a dead market in the late 1980s to this monumental 1990 release. By 1991, publications like the Tampa Tribune were openly crediting strong themes for pinball's rising popularity. Writer Tom Henry noted that the artwork, targets, and sounds were finally working together to create a subplot and a story, specifically citing The Simpsons as the prime example. And this formula was so successful that in 2003, Stern Pinball, which was the successor to Data East, released a full-blown sequel, The Simpsons Pinball Party.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The 1990 Simpsons pinball machine proved that physical mechanics alone just weren't enough anymore. Players wanted to be immersed in a world. By combining hand-drawn art, custom voice acting, and interactive storytelling, Data East didn't just make a game, they created a whole experience. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. How did injecting a strong narrative theme fundamentally save the physical arcade experience from extinction? Think about the power of storytelling the next time you see a physical game. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.